AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I am Eric Franchi, and I am not joined by Joe Zappa. He is out this week, but I am joined by my friend Shane Shevlin, co-founder and CEO of Bedrock Platform, full disclosure, and Imperium portfolio company. Shane, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
How you holding up? So you're a UK guy. You were in Miami earlier this week, and then where are you? You were in New York?
I'm in New York now. Yes, we got back yesterday afternoon. A little frazzled, if I'm honest, Eric. What a few days! My goodness, what a few days! What an event, I'm a first-time possibler, so yeah, I was actually blown away by the event. It's just a fantastic event. It really is.
Yeah, we're recording this on Friday, May 1st. Possible was earlier this week. I think we're all recovering. Let's get into the conversation here. So, quick intro about Shane. I'll do it for you. So, you were early DoubleClick Europe to Google, then a decade as a commercial lead at IPONWeb through the Criteo acquisition. So, you are an ad tech OG through and through. And then you launched Bedrock from London in early 2024. The thesis around Bedrock, and we'll get into this, especially in the context of what we want to talk about today, which is, this announcement you had that kind of took the industry by storm with Index Cloud, is strip the bloat out of the buy-side stack, rebuild it around precision, transparency, and speed. And basically, announcement that has everyone talking that I wanted to spend time getting into is Bedrock's bidder is the world's first containerized DSP running directly on Index Cloud. Did I have all that right?
You have all that correct, Eric. Yes, you do. So, yeah, we've been blown away by the response from the announcement. We are the world's first DSP to be fully containerized inside sell-side infrastructure. What does that all mean? Well, containerization is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. Why has this not been done before is a good question. The answer lies somewhere between conflict of interest, competitive prevention, and just, I guess, the engineering lift actually required to containerize a full code base that represents, DSP is significant. So this was not a quick delivered project. We started planning this months out, probably back in October with the Index engineering team. They were amazing and really, really put themselves to the wheelhouse on this with us. Since the turn of the year, we've been kind of really leaning in and in-person sessions in New York with Ray and the team. There were moments along the way where I thought, you know what, this may not actually happen, right? There were complications. Things like pacing had to be done differently. So we had to kind of go back to the drawing board on a few of the core pieces of functionality from, our external instance of the bidder. But thankfully, Andrew, Ray, and the team were just phenomenal. They really got behind this project from the outset. And we were so psyched when the first bid request actually landed. And we saw it come through, and I think Damien's quote, which Andrew loved it at the time, was when he saw that first impression come through, that first bid request come through, he was like, why did we ever design or build DSPs the other way? He immediately got it and saw, where this could take us.
And by Andrew, you're referring to Andrew Fasale, the founder and CEO at Index Exchange, which is, the company that is behind Index Cloud. Here's what I'd like to do, Shane. I would like to do an explain it like I'm five explanation of containerization. I'm going to say it to you. You can blow me up and say, I don't have this correctly, but I figured we'd just kind of ground the audience in, kind of normal programmatic versus containerization. You game?
Sure.
All right. Normal programmatic. An SSP sees an impression, sends a signal across the internet to DSPs sitting in their own data centers, asking who wants to bid all in 100 milliseconds. The math only works if the SSP throttles. Basically, it picks and chooses which opportunities to send to what DSPs. The buy side only ever sees a slice then. So the result is like AI models on the buy side are making decisions on incomplete information and reach is kind of gated by infrastructure spend, not performance. Do I have all that correct? Or would you like to add anything?
Correct so far.
Okay. So what you and Index just did, you packaged the bidder into a container and dropped it inside Index's own infrastructure. So the bidder now lives next to the impressions instead of across the internet from them, which means no throttling, no traffic shaping. Model sees and scores everything in real time rather than just a slice. So if this all holds, it sort of breaks the link between infrastructure budget, which is, the big limiter, as I understand in programmatic, and like market access, and resets the cost curve of like programmatic buying. Am I correct on that?
You are correct, Eric, but there's probably, I guess, a pre-qualification that's required here before you get into the good stuff of, savings and being more competitive in the auction and so on, which is at no point do Index kind of see inside our decision layer with this deployment. This is not a collaboration between us and Index for them to have a stake in how we decide media is bought or not bought or bid on. So that was super important to us, right? So containerization, its true value in that context is we handed over a fully containerized version of our application, which we developed for the bidder itself, which was, it's cryptographically signed. So the Index engineering team cannot see inside there. And we retain full control and independence over how we make decisions on whether we bid or not. I think that's a pretty important thing to just clarify.
Got it. Okay. Makes perfect sense. So this is a very big announcement. I think has big implications. Before we get into all that stuff, why did you start a DSP? People assume that there's like a couple of DSPs that own the market and, the opportunity, has basically been eaten up by that.
Yeah. Great question. I probably at the very beginning of this journey, Eric, told myself that I needed my sort of head examined. Like, why am I doing this? With the levels of competition we have in this space and dominance. Yeah, a lot of people were looking at me like I was kind of crazy. The reality of the answer is the idea was born out of frustration. So towards the tail end of my time at IPONWeb, I worked a lot on the Media Grid product, which ended up becoming the Commerce Grid when they jumped across to Criteo. But the Media Grid was an interesting project to work on because it came online roughly in line with GDPR, but also this sort of fervency of the deprecation of the cookie. So we got to test like tons of different use cases around ID resolution, and so curation or deal-based trading as a mechanism to kind of filter traffic, shape traffic, create cohorts of audiences that were interesting to buyers. Really, really strong mechanics behind curation. But the reality of curation, even back then, was it sucked. It didn't work properly, and that was predominantly down to what was happening on the DSP side. So you can troubleshoot the hell out of a deal, but if you don't have everything lined up correctly on the DSP end, deals are just not going to scale. And for me, this was a really frustrating operational headache while I was still with the IPONWeb team. And, secondly, it was clear to me that the direction of travel with supply side businesses, whether they were media networks, SSPs, but also publishers themselves, was that deal-based trading was increasingly trusted as a safe way to trade, in a currency that the publisher understood, whether that was first-party signals, a way to protect price for premium inventory. So deals were not going away. In fact, the opposite was happening. So they were proliferating further. And if you look at, some of the industry trade statistics, that's backed up over the last few years. So I think we're well north of 70% of all programmatically traded media being transacted over deals. Whatever the form of deal, public, private, doesn't really matter. Deals are a trusted sort of mechanism. So Bedrock Platform was kind of born out of that frustration. And, one of the cornerstones of our technology stack is make deals work better.
Got it. So is the Index Cloud announcement, was this like what you were building towards? Or was this opportunity presented to you and it was like, oh, we're the company that's built for this and this was the obvious next moment for us? Like, how did this whole thing come together?
I think it was kind of a natural meeting of minds. So Index actually only launched their marketplace not that long ago. They were probably a little bit late to the game. But the way they positioned it, I think, made a lot of sense to us. And increasingly, they were seeing new data vendors come into the marketplace. We ourselves, we're working with a number of different contextual providers back in the UK. We're looking for new and interesting ways to kind of figure out how to present their data to enrich supply. And so sell-side decisioning to us kind of just, it makes sense. If whatever you're trying to do on the buy side is incomplete based on maybe just a limitation of the right data partner or scale or if you're on one of the larger traditional DSPs, again, traffic shaping, stuff that kind of creates loss around the signal that is valuable to you. So our view is you need good data to optimize. And so some data is good inside the DSP. More data is better. If you can move upstream and kind of find those signals, combine them with, all of the stuff that you need to do inside the bidder itself around frequency capping, audience signals that you might use for something as simple as age gating, say, and then combine that with much more high fidelity signals that are coming directly from the publisher. That gives you a much better shot of delivering against the APIs that your customers expect from you.
Got it. So decode this whole thing for like a smart buyer who doesn't think about infrastructure the way you think about infrastructure all day long. A containerized DSP running on Index Cloud, what's actually different? And then what does it feel like on the other end to the buyer?
It feels exactly the same as the first response to here, because like we still retain, full control of the front end. That still runs on our servers in terms of the reporting. So everything that happens inside the containerized instance is, we're shipping that out. Like that does not need to be real time. So, it's probably minutes, could be reduced to seconds, but that's not really a requirement for reporting. So we're still tracking everything. So everything looks and feels exactly the same as it does on the external instance.
Okay. So then what's actually different?
What's different is for me, the kind of most exciting part is that we've collapsed the latency window, like the traditional latency window that you hear about in programmatic between buyer and seller, which, averages anywhere from 150 milliseconds to maybe 200, 250. So we have collapsed that to below a single millisecond, which kind of is interesting on a whole bunch of different levels. The most interesting of which I think is if you don't need that latency window anymore as a bidder, what do you do with it? I think the obvious answer is you hand it to somebody who needs it. So Index don't need it because we're leveraging the same compute as they use to send us the impression opportunities, the bid requests. So let's partner with somebody who actually has kind of grappled with this 200 millisecond constraint, or this, in their case, 20 millisecond constraint. So a model builder who's, stuffing as many kind of variables from the bid request and maybe some external ones as well into that window that they've got, but it's probably capping out at 20 or maybe 30 kind of data points. But now you can start thinking about like, what if we could use 200 data points? That is a fundamentally different paradigm within which you begin to think about how well can I optimize the open web?
That's the line in the release that I keep coming back to. So it's, and I'll kind of quote, compete on decisioning and performance rather than infrastructure, end quote. So like that's a thesis about where DSP economics are headed, right? Is the bet that infrastructure commoditizes and the moat moves entirely to models?
I think the short answer is yes, Eric. So Andrew Casale loves to think very big picture about the types of efficiencies that this brings. His view is that in 5 years' time, all buy-side buying applications will have one or all of their kind of instances hosted on the sell side, because the delta between what came before and what we can see now is just too large to ignore, and it just will not make sense. And so I think it does come down to the decision there that you have and the access that you have to data, and what is that data.
Who wins in this scenario? Like what types of companies?
Obviously, we serve the interests of media buyers in the main agencies. I think their customers, brands win through much lower take rate within the overall sort of add up of buy side technology. They win through much better visibility on the audiences that they know to be valuable to them, whether that's coming from deals or the open market for that matter. And with zero QPS caps, like the open market and the full bid stream becomes an option for us as a small to medium sized business. Whereas before it just simply wasn't, given the cost to process the whole of internet scale required with open market. I think independent publishers will see a huge benefit from this, because if we can effectively now compete with both the scale and the loss reduction that the walled gardens offer their largest buyers and deliver the performance on similar terms, then why would you not claw back some of the spend that's kind of gone across to those closed ecosystems? I think independent publishing benefits from that massively.
And when you said before, like why 20 data points, why not 200 data points in this scenario where you would do a lot more stuff? Do you see like the custom algorithm startups and the curation startups, or like larger companies start to play a larger role here as well?
Yes, I think I do, Eric. So, whether you are exclusively leveraging, an integration with a supply side partner upstream to inform deals better, or whether you're doing it downstream, inside the bidder itself. And we've already begun to explore kind of ways that we could bolt on models directly inside the container and influence the bid decisioning there, or whether you're doing both. I think there's a new breed of optimizing companies that are looking at kind of both ends of that equation or that challenge. So yes, I think this will breathe life into the amazing work that those companies do. I say amazing, just on the backdrop of continued constraints of latency windows and just general hardship with data loss or signal loss, as it were, where when you have kind of large amounts of data crossing networks with the horrible kind of open internet in between, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What's like the specific thing that custom models can do inside a containerized bidder that they genuinely cannot do at the traditional DSP layer?
So again, I think that the same challenges around delay and loss come into play there. So even if you're working with a model builder downstream uniquely, the same questions come up. Is like, can we co-locate? Is there a cost associated with that? What is that cost? How are we going to make the economics work? If everything is hosted in the same infrastructure, leveraging the same compute, then all of the costs associated with things like egress, which is when data leaves, one machine to get to another, essentially reading and reserializing data, across kind of memory caches, stuff like that, it just collapses again to near zero. So it's just a generally more efficient way to maximize the power of the model that you're using.
Got it. One other question on this, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about your unique situation as a UK based company now all of a sudden kind of thrust upon a global stage, is what you said earlier around specifically the separation of you as DSP from Index is like the neutrality question, right? So DSP running on the SSP's cloud might raise some eyebrows. How did you and the Index team draw the line, and what should buyers trust about that separation?
So beyond the stuff I mentioned, Eric, around being sort of protected through cryptography and just the accessibility of our code base being non-existent for the Index engineers, I think we like Index as a partner for this project because their positioning is very, very clear. They serve the interests of publishers. They do not operate a media business. The commercial terms of their marketplace are very compelling and, again, non-dilutive really. And so they sort of position themselves as the Switzerland of the pipes of the infrastructure required to deliver scale. So they're, absolutely in the scale game compared maybe with some of the other smaller SSPs that exist, but they're uniquely in the scale game. So, I think after Google, across all formats, they're probably the second highest in terms of the scale that they deliver. And they are concerned with improving the efficiency of the ecosystem at large rather than, other ways to drive revenue that leverage the media that go through their pipes, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about Bedrock. So you've been deliberate about geography, and this takes us back to some of our conversations. We were talking about the investment. So UK, then France, then the US. I would say kind of carefully. Does this announcement again just it made such waves, and I'm sure you're getting crushed with inbound, force the US timeline some, or or are you staying disciplined and not chasing it?
Well, I feel like I can give you a bit of an exclusive here, Eric. Yes, it absolutely does force our timeline in the US.
All right,
and
by the way, listeners, I've been advocating for this. Go on, Shane.
I mean, listen, it forces our timeline, Eric, because some of the inbounds that we've had are from people who are looking at this challenge stroke opportunity through the lens of like, what are my annualized savings on DSP fees, right? And if you are operating tens or hundreds of millions of dollars annually in media spend, then, this becomes extremely meaningful. So yes, I think we need to get our ducks in a row because we obviously are a UK-based business. Most of the people we have are outside of the US. We did make our first US hire just a couple of weeks ago, James McWilliams, who is incredible. He's had a baptism of fire. He was at Possible with me. He's a great guy. He's based in New York, but he will be leading the charge for us, and we will be hiring probably pretty aggressively this year.
Awesome. That's great news. But you are in the UK, and the business started in the UK. What's different about doing an ad tech startup, or maybe this startup specifically, from London versus New York? Like, I'm a New Yorker, right? So I might think about the constraints, but like, there's constraints, but there's also perhaps some advantages. So talk about it.
There are. I think the main one, Eric, is the talent pool we have available to us on the engineering front. So we've got an amazing team based in Krakow in Poland. We also have some people actually who are based further afield in India and Thailand. So, London's a good place just to be able to kind of manage all of those conversations and keep an eye on everything. That said, I do plan to be spending more time in the US myself throughout the summer, the rest of this year. We can't help being a UK standard company. That's where I'm based. That's where my family is. But looking forward to spending more time in New York and further afield in the US. I spent a reasonable amount of time there during my time at DoubleClick. And yeah, particularly New York. Love coming back here.
All right, well, we're excited to have you here more. You're coming off your first Possible. What was your impressions of Possible? And you had, I'm sure, lots of conversations. Did you learn anything, or did you come away with something that is in your mind?
First off, what an event! Like it kind of reminded me a little bit of Cannes, except I was much more productive in 3 days than I am over the course of a full week in Cannes.
Yeah, because it's collapsed. It's very close together. You're not spending half the time traipsing up and down the crescent.
Exactly. And but more than that, like it felt like people came there to do business. And
yes,
we had some incredible meetings. Obviously there's been a ton of buzz about the announcement. We're meeting not just, sort of ICP kind of prospects, but actually tons of conversations with the supply side, with, supply oriented businesses that are looking at what this step change in, how we build infrastructure actually means for them, businesses that are buying their own supply, that are thinking about data distribution in new and interesting ways, either via their own stacks or through kind of trusted partners like Index. Just amazing. And my God, the follow-up list is very long. So I'm going to be busy next week.
For sure. You're right. This announcement, what you're working on, it does feel like a step change. Does it change how you think about the trajectory of Bedrock over the next 1, 3, 5 years?
It's too early for me to answer that question, Eric, this week. But yeah, I mean, what this gives us is a shot at real scale, right? Comparative scale to, holding groups working inside the traditional larger DSPs. That was the kind of key motivation for us in working with Index to deliver this project. And so now that we could do that, as you suggested earlier, everything comes back to where's the data? Can we access it or can our clients access it? And which models are we using to power innovation around that data?
Okay. I won't push you on the 5-year plan then.
Thank you.
Shane, thank you. You've been very generous with your time. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about Bedrock?
Well, they can visit us at bedrockplatform.com, or they can ping me directly, Shane at bedrockplatform.com, or they can speak with Austin, my co-founder, who's also been possible this week. She is our chief commercial officer, and reach out to either of us. We'll get something going.
Awesome. Shane, thank you for spending some time. Hope everybody liked it, and we will see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.